Curbside Podcast presents a new series to you, Creatures and Conjurations, where we take some of your favorite pop culture characters, some of your favorite heroes, villains, and everything in between, and we see if we can put them into the D&D world. So tonight we are starting off with a personal favorite class from myself, for Olive, and for Joe, the Artificer. An interesting class where you can mix science and magic. And we're going to teach you guys how to build an artificer. And then for our next episode, we're going to teach you guys how to build some certain artificers of your favorite characters. But with that, as always, shout out to our sponsors, Rage Energy, available at repsports.com. Use the promo code Curbside8 at checkout. And as well, our partners, Jerky.pro, use promo code Curbside8 at checkout to get a special discount. We'll be doing their Hot Jerky Challenge at J1 Expo. So please pray for me, because I can't do spicy things, and everyone wants to watch me sweat. As always, buy our merch on ProWrestlingTees.com. Our special pink menagerie shirts are out and available for purchase. If you purchase one of those from now to the end of the year, 50% of the profits made are going to the American Cancer Society for research. It's an amazing cause. It's a really cool shirt, so please donate. And with that, I'm going to turn the controls over to Joe here, and he's going to teach us how to make artificers. Joe, take it away.
All right. So, Artificer. It's a fun class. It's a great class. It's a trash class. A lot of different opinions. We're just going to get into it because at the end of the day, I just need you to know that artificers are just as good as any other class. They require some DM fiat, some cooperation with your party members, some cooperation with a DM who is willing to expand the rules, look at the rules, and adjust the rules as necessary, and who isn't afraid of a little bit of homebrew. Because unlike many classes, Artificer relies on not just a system, but an overall leniency towards player freedom, creativity, capacity, competence, and capability.
The 5 C's.
The 5 C's.
Maybe there's 3. No.
Without further ado, what we're going to do is dive into the 1 to 20 explanation of the different features that you get, all of the core information you need. So if your question is, what is an artificer, what does it do, and why would I want to play it?
What is your artificer, and what does he do?
Very much. Papers, please. That's what you do. So, we are going to begin by going through level 1 to 20. After that, we are going to endeavor to explore some finer points of the 1 to 20 progression, and then after that, we will finish up by referencing a few characters in pop culture, fiction, and media that you might be familiar with. Characters that you might know are artificers, and characters that you might not. So let's get into it. Artificer. One of the most popular and widely requested classes for 5th edition is actually, technically, not a core class. It was released with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It is not a player's handbook core class, which means if you're playing, for lack of a better term, if you're playing official D&D, or if you're in Adventurers League, your PHB +1 is eaten up by Tasha's if you want to be an artificer. But that's all right. Tasha's has a lot of good stuff in it, and the Artificer has a lot of good stuff in it, so let's dive in. Artificers. They get a D8 hit die, which is really good because it could be a D6 if looking at you, wizard, or a D4 looking at you, wizards of ages long past. The proficiencies when you take this class, when you start as an artificer. It's very important to know for the rules of multiclassing. If you don't know, now you'll know. The class you start in starts with everything. When you multi-class, there is a specific session that dictates what you get. So if you start as an Artificer level 1, you get proficiency in light and medium armor, as well as shields, meaning you can put your dexterity at a nice +2 and cap out at a 20 to 25 AC in a very easy, comfortable manner. Your weapons are simple weapons: daggers, darts, clubs, and firearms. And we're going to get to that in a moment. The tool proficiencies you have are thieves' tools, tinker's tools, and one type of artisan tools of your choice. Now, wood carving tools, brewing tools, there's all sorts of different tools that you can use, and the more interesting or eclectic the choice, the more fun it can be sometimes to leverage. You get proficiency in Constitution and Intelligence saving throws. Very important because con saves are necessary to not get drunk when you make too strong of a whiskey. And Intelligence saves are very important to not get Psychic Lanced. If you don't know how bad that is, good for you. Your DM loves you, respects you, and wants you to be happy.
If you
For the rest of you,
we're
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Exactly.
Psychic Lance, you know.
And then you get to choose 2 skills from Arcana, History, Investigation, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Sleight of Hand. Intelligence, a little bit of Wisdom, and some Dex. Which, if you're building an Artificer, those are the order that you should go. Intelligence, a little bit of Wisdom, and some Dex. Your starting equipment, very easy. 2 simple weapons of your choice: a light crossbow and 20 bolts. And you can choose between studded leather armor or scale mail. Very important because scale mail is a really good armor class buff, especially at level 1 to level 5. You also get a set of thieves' tools and a Dungeoneer's pack. If you don't know what's in a Dungeoneer's pack, look it up. Everything in there is good. It's useful. Use it. It will come up and it's great. If you don't know what those items do,
V
well,
disagrees. He has a diplomat stack, but whatever.
we will get into V when we get into the nonsense that is homebrewery and hey, my game is boring. I would like to put in a character who has a WMD of plot. Anyway, and then alternatively, you can start with 5d4 times 10 GP to buy your own equipment because Artificers apparently are just broke. Now, that's if you start as an Artificer. If you multi-class into one, it requires that you have the multi-classing ability score minimum for your class and an intelligence of 13.
Which means you
So
gotta
if you
be
are a
smart
wizard
enough to be an Artificer.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's
Absolutely.
one of those classes. You have to be this tall to ride this ride. You have to be smart enough to be an Artificer.
And if you're not, don't worry. I'll teach you how to use some stilts to put yourself in a position where, yeah, you hit the line on the cardboard cutout. We're golden. But multi-classing. If you pick up Artificer as a multi-class option, you gain proficiency in light and medium armor as well as shields, and you get proficiency in thieves' tools and tinker's tools. Notice it doesn't say firearms. This is very important for later. A roll for firearm proficiency. Now, in general, firearms are an optional role in the DMG. Not every DM is going to be running firearms, and if they are, they can be anything from black powder pistols all the way through to modern firearms up to space lasers and weapons that do horrific science things. Again, we'll get to that later. But ensure that before you run an Artificer, if you want to be using the optional rules for firearms, that you speak with it with your Dungeon Master before endeavoring to build the character so that you, your Dungeon Master, at minimum, are on the same page.
Which is very important.
This is very important. Now,
The
also
golden
first
rule,
level,
much like everything, communication.
yes. Remember, kids, use your words.
You're
Now-
playing an Artificer. You should be intelligent enough to use your word.
And if
Minimum
you're not,
of 13
there's
scores.
hacks for you. Ha ha! No comment. Magical tinkering. At first level, you learn how to invest a spark of magic into mundane objects. You must have thieves' tools or artisan tools in hand. You can then touch a tiny non-magical object as an action and give it one of the following magical properties of your choice. This is important because this is one of those features that is incredibly small, minor, and does nothing, that eventually can do some really insane things depending on how you leverage not only your spellcasting, but the spellcasting of your friends. So your options are, the object sheds a bright light and a 5-foot radius and dim light for an additional 5 feet. It's not a lot, but guess what? It's enough to see and read and work on something. Whenever tapped by a creature, the object emits a recorded message that can be heard up to 10 feet away. You utter the message when you bestow this property on the object, and the recording can be no more than 6 seconds long. So that's 6 seconds of dialogue that is at vocal volume that cannot be heard beyond 10 feet.
We're sorry, the artificer
That is-
you're trying to reach is not available.
Exactly. And that's something that you can leverage later on down the line, or if you're very clever with it, just to communicate in 10-foot increments. Your next options are, the object continuously emits your choice of an odor or nonverbal sound, like wind, waves, chirping, other natural background ambient sounds, and this chosen phenomenon is perceivable up to 10 feet away. Again, if you're leveraging this and you are, let's say, dealing with a bunch of things that are very scent-based and you have a really yummy scent, you know they'll come to it, and you'll know if one's within 10 feet because it'll start sniffing you. And lastly, a static visual effect appears on one of the object's surfaces. This effect can be a picture, up to 25 words of text, lines and shapes, or a mixture of these elements as you like. Now, if you and your DM speak German, just make the compound words that are 900 letters long. It's great. You have a whole novel, 27 words. You just cut out 2 of them. Maybe a little bit of context is gone, but you're golden. Or, for the case of most people, just a small picture. And mind you, this is a tiny item, right? This is something that would fit in a fist, something this big. Now, the chosen property lasts indefinitely. Exactly. As an action, you can touch the object and end the property early. Now, that means it lasts forever or until dispelled, because it is a magical effect. And it's really important to know that, because if you are clever and can leverage this in the future, you can learn a lot about who's coming your way or what's going on over there based on what you're doing with this. And just so you're aware, you can bestow this magic on multiple objects, touching one object each time you use this feature, though a single object can only bear one property at a time. The maximum number of objects you can use is equal to your intelligence modifier, minimum of 1. So if you're an artificer, you should have high intelligence. If you multi-class, it's a minimum of 13, so that means minimum of 1. If you try to exceed your maximum, the oldest one will immediately stop. Not super important, but now you know. So, we're going to move on to the spellcasting, and then we're going to kind of push through the rest of the levels. As like most spellcasters, they have the spellcasting feature. This is important to know. Spellcasting is not the same thing as pact magic. Spellcasting is a specific feature, and pact magic is a specific feature, and they are not the same. Practically speaking, do they give you the same abilities? In most ways, yes. But there are certain rules and prerequisites that matter for this conversation, and we will get there someday when we get to the Warlock, the only poor lost soul that has pact magic. Wow. The tools to cast your spells are spellcasting foci, specifically thieves' tools or an artisan's tool. It's important to know that it's not the blacksmithing tool, it's the thieves' tools or the artisan's tool that you chose. So if it's a brewing kit or if it's a calligraphy kit, that's a very interesting way of doing your magic by writing it down in beautiful calligraphic ink. But when you cast these spells, it's important to know, and this is recommended in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, that when you do so, remember that what you're doing is science more than magic. So if I'm going to cast poison spray, it's not just going to be me wiggling my fingers, saying a magic word, and casting poison spray. It'll be me with a straw full of angry tiny snakes, and I go, and then spray a poison. Things of that level. At level 1, you get cantrips. They appear on the Artificer spell list. Very easy table to find. And when you prepare and cast a spell, you can pick the spells you know. from the list, and when you do, you choose a number of artificial spells equal to your intelligence modifier plus half your artificer level. So, ideally, at level 1, you'd start with roughly 4 or 5. Minimum of 1. All right? And you can pick your cantrips. So you would start with a grand total of, at level 1, 2 cantrips and 2 first level spells. But that will slowly increase over time. Isn't it? Isn't it? All right. Now, spellcasting is something that you get, and then you get ritual casting, which allows you to cast an artificial spell as a ritual if it has the ritual tag and you have the spell prepared. That's level 1. That's the big important information that you need to know. Now we're going to move on. At levels 2, you get the ability to imbue mundane items with certain magical infusions. Go to the Artificer Infusions table, look at the prerequisites, look at your options, pick what you think works best for you, your party, your situation. And then when you do so, you're able to follow the rules on that table, and much like your conversion of non-magical to magical via magical tinkering, you can then use those infusions to create incredibly useful, if sometimes niche, but ultimately fun, magical items and effects. These are also indefinitely, unless you die. Unless you die, it's dispelled or a number of days have passed equal to your intelligence modifier. So remember that. Your infusions wear off. The third level, everybody's favorite level, again, except for warlocks, clerics, and maybe 1 or 2 other classes we'll talk about later. You get to pick your subclass. Now, your artificial specialist subclasses are the artillerist, the alchemist, the armorer, and the battlesmith. Long story short, alchemists make medicines, salves, bombs, and weird goo. I don't know what it does. You don't know what it does, but you made it. Throw it at a guy. See what happens.
It'll be useful.
Armor. It's got to be, right? The armorer builds and refines and augments suits of armor to give them not only great tanking ability, but solid offensive ability, and by doing so frees up some of their infusions and some of their attunement slots for interesting combinations of items. The artillerist has big gun, will travel. That's your artillerist. If you're playing the artificer to have not just 1 gun but 2, this is who you want to be.
Ew.
And if you ever wanted that robot dog when you were a kid that would walk around and bark and do little backflips, the battlesmith's for you.
Do you remember
Is the
Techno
robot
Kitty?
dog
Do
big?
you remember Techno Puppy? It's that.
If you remember Techno Kitty and Techno Puppy, remember, aspirin's good for your heart, ibuprofen and other similar anti-inflammatories are good for your knees and lower back. Drink more water.
Stop calling me old.
And remember, you need to get that checkup soon.
I feel attacked.
And we'll get into the
She's
subclasses
attacking us.
later as we're discussing some of the more specific abilities that the Artificer can inherit. But right now, we're going to move right along. As at level 3, not only do you get to pick your specialization, your Artificial Specialist subclass, you get the right tool for the job. You learn how to produce exactly the tool you need. With Thieves' tools or Artisan's tools in hand, again, not Blacksmith's tools, because that's just a bunch of hammers and wrenches and stuff, right? I don't know. I'm not a blacksmith, I just play one on TV. You can use your Thieves or Artisan's tools to create a magical set of Artisan's tools in an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you. So, yes, your cool brewing kit and bottles and vials and your tools for alchemy, you pour out wood carving kit. Why? How? Doesn't matter.
Magic.
You're the artificer. You tell them how. They don't ask. They just listen.
They're too dumb to know how.
Because magic, bitch.
Cause magic or science or carving. I don't know. It takes an hour of uninterrupted work to create these tools, which can coincide with a short or long rest. Remember that for later. And though the product of magic, the tools are non-magical and they vanish when you use this feature again. So you can just make the tools you need as you need them, given a short or long rest. Or an hour of uninterrupted time where your party can hold off the horde of zombie gnolls that are battering down the door, just because, you're busy. Level 4, everybody's favorite thing, you get your ability score improvement or your feat. Now, if your intelligence is an 18 or a 19, you're going to want to get it to 20. And if it's lower than that, you're going to want to get it to 20. There's a lot of reasons for that.
Bigger numbers mean better things.
And yes, they absolutely do, especially for the Artificer. Now, if you can take a feat, there's a lot of really good feats. So many good feats. But feats are for another video. Remember, always ask your DM. Feats, as an optional rule, just like firearms, can we use them? Can we take them? If so, good luck picking, because there's a lot of good options. If not, my condolences. Your DM loves you, I'm sure, just maybe not as much as they should. Level 5, you get your specialist feature. And all of that is specific to the subclass. We'll get to that when we talk about subclasses specifically. 6th level, your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check that you make that uses your proficiency with a tool. And since you can make tools, and since you can swap tools, as long as you have proficiency in that tool, you're good to go. Tool expertise works with thieves' tools, meaning you can pick a lock just as good as a rogue.
If not better.
If not better. 7th level, you get one of the most powerful, most used, and most underrated abilities in 5e, Flash of Genius. When you or another creature you can see within 30 feet of you makes an ability check or saving throw, you can use a reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. And you can use this number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, as expected, minimum of once. And you get all these uses back on a long rest. So, Billiam tries to make an athletics check to jump over the piranha pit and gets a 9. Nah. 13. It's not a lot, but I promise you, it's more than enough. This is something you should be using. Maybe not every opportunity, but every opportunity should make you wonder, is this a good time to use it? It's very important that you do so because that is one of your best, most useful abilities for supporting your party. At the end of the day, you've got to support your party. This is a cooperative game, and Artificers, it really does. And very few Artificers are going to be yoked enough where they could just go out and pistol whip somebody to death anyway. So, maybe rely on your Barbarian or your Fighter to go out there and do it.
Magic armor to do that.
And a D8 hit die.
Guns.
And a D8 hit die.
Some of us cast guns, so...
Remember, tough as a feat, it's an optional one, but maybe not for you.
I cast sawed-off fucking shotgun at you at level.
I cast click-clack, motherfucker.
I would like to use my optional feature. What size shoes are those? Because they look like my size. Level 8, you get your next ability score improvement or feat. If you're at 20 intelligence and your DM allows feats, there's a couple of really good ones. Sharpshooter might be a great feat for you. Magic Initiate might be a great feat for you. Sorcerer Initiate might be a great feat for you. Skill Expert will always be a great feat for you. Level 9, Artificer Specialist feature. More subclass treats and ribbons. Level 10, you achieve a profound understanding of how to use and make magic items. You can attune up to 4 magic items at once, which means that the fighter, who can carry 7,000 pounds of nonsense, can only do 3. You get a 4th one. And if you craft a magic item with a rarity of common or uncommon, it takes you a quarter of the normal time and it costs you half as much of the usual gold. We'll get to that. Level 11, spell storing item. You learn how to store a spell in an object. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can touch one simple or martial weapon or one item that you can use as a spellcasting focus, and you store a spell in it, choosing a 1st or 2nd level spell from your Artificer spell list that requires a 1 action to cast. You don't have to have it prepared, you just choose it. While holding the object, a creature can take an action to produce a spell's effect from it, using your ability modifier. If the spell requires concentration, the creature must concentrate, and the spell stays in the object until it's been used a number of times equal to twice your intelligence modifier. So anywhere from twice to 10 times, or until you use this feature again. So, are you tired of casting Dispel Magic? Oh well. Are you tired of casting Detect Magic? Now the Barbarian can do it. He's got 5 con, he'll be fine. So you give him a little carved piglet that goes oink, 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 oink when it's detecting magic, and now he can do it for you. So that you can stay safely away from the horrible magical effect that would blow your legs off like a claymore. Remember that for later, it'll be important.
Or
Level 12, you get
tired
another
of
ability
using
score
cure
improvement or
wounds.
feat. What was that?
I said, if you're tired of running across the battlefield to use cure wounds on your buddy, just put cure wounds in a magic necklace so he can touch it and activate it himself.
Yes.
And there it is. That right there is the play. I promise you, that's the play.
Not speaking from experience at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Shifty eye, shifty eye,
Who
shifty
Who gave
eye.
that sorcerer a D6 hit die?
Artificer, never heard of her.
I barely know her. Level 12, you get your next feat or ability score improvement. If you're not at 20 intelligence by now, get to 20 intelligence.
Get
Okay.
smarter.
Level 13, you get nothing because you didn't get to 20 intelligence. Level 14, you can attune up to 5 magic items at once. That's almost 2 characters worth of magic items, and you ignore all class, race, spell, and level requirements on attuning or using a magic item. I cannot stress enough, that will almost never come up. But if it does, it is going to be the coolest thing that happened that week. Every time. Level 15, you get a feature granted by your artificial specialist choice. Your subclass features are great. Some of them greater than others. But we'll get to that later. Level 16, guess what? Another feat, another ASI. If you're not at 20 intelligence, stop. You're done. Tap out of Artificer, go back to being a barbarian. It's okay. We still love you. We still see you. You're still valid. But this isn't the class for you. As to feat, tough is always good. Lucky, because why not? You're already adding to everybody else's rolls. Let's just re-roll them, too.
Is it better to be smart or better to be lucky?
I'd rather be
not
lucky
both?
than good any day.
I'd rather be smart than
level-
lucky, Eddie.
At level 17, you get nothing. You get nothing and you like it. Level 18,
Pretty much.
you can attune up to 6 magic items at once. That's 2 characters worth of magic items. So you and your robot dog can each have 3 legendary artifact items that you're attuned to.
So good. It's so good.
Is Bosco the robot cat attuned to 2 different dragon slaying weapons and a sentient whip? Cool. You've got extra slots. What are you worried about? And then at level 19, you can get 1 last ability score improvement or feat. I'm not going to make a joke. You know what you have to do.
Such
You know what
restraint.
you know what your score should look like by now. If you've got 20 intelligence, 14 dex, 14 whiz,
And a 9 strength.
if 9 is very generous. 9 is very generous.
I've got a negative.
There it is.
My artificer has brittle bone disease. Like, it's bad.
Just understand, I don't need to lift anything. I'm smart. You need to lift it because I'm smart enough to know why you need to lift it. That's how this works. Level 20 Capstone. You get a +1 bonus to all saving throws per magic item you're currently attuned to. +6 to all saving throws. Unless a paladin has access to a homebrew item that gives them a +1 to their aura, you now have the highest possible bonus in the game from a single feature. Maybe don't use those strength and con saves too awful much. Maybe try to avoid those charisma saving throws, because I'm going to tell you right now, +6 on a charisma saving throw, and you roll a 10, that's a 16. At level 20, a lot of the things are going to have a DC of 18 or above, which means bad things. Very bad things.
That's not for you.
And if you're
That's for
reduced to
somebody
0 hit
else.
points but not killed outright, you can use a reaction to end one of your infusions, causing you to drop to 1 hit point instead of 0. So it won't work on power word kill, but that 273 damage attack that was leveled on you whenever that weird paladin abomination hit you with a level 13 smite and your legs went flying off in the other direction, you don't need those legs. You got robot legs at 1 HP. And that, friends, enemies, lovers, past and future, is your 1 to 20 breakdown of the Artificer. All right, so you guys, what do you think? What do we think of the Artificer?
Oh, I absolutely love artificers. As I've told on the show multiple times before, I played an amazing armor smith artificer, the armor Quincy Sotar, and I love artificers. Anytime anyone wants to play an artificer, I get so excited.
Oh boy, is it my turn? Yes. I've been playing an artificer. I've been playing a gunsmith artificer for approximately what, Joe? 3 years now? About? Yeah. So I've been playing this gunsmith artificer for a hot minute, and it's a long story as to why I started artificer, but that's next time's session or episode. But no, I've been playing a artillerist or a gunsmith artificer, depending on if we were doing the unearthed arcana or the Tashas, which we can get into later. Because funny story, when I began playing my artificer, there was no Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. There was only unearthed arcana, and so I started off as an unearthed arcana gunsmith. And then my DM was kind enough to fuse the artificer from UA and eventually Tasha's and kind of give me a homebrew setup. However, I do think a lot of those skills transfer if you're playing a gun-based artificer. And I think that overall, if you have the creativity, if you have the know-how, if you have the accommodation from your DM, and you guys are just really focused on creating a fun character that is balanced but exemplifies everything you want the character to be, Artificer can be a really fun class when you have the right mindset and the creativity for it.
I'm glad to hear that. So, we've gone through the class. We have an overview of it. We have some player testimonials to how fun it can be. Let's take just a couple minutes to look at the subclasses, and then we'll move on to something maybe a little bit more fun and interesting for some of you. So we're just going to go dive into the themes, because this is definitely something that you, as a player, should consider before picking your subclass. Go over these subclasses, compare them yourself, see what you prefer and what you like. But let's just give you a quick rundown. Your Alchemist. They get Healing Word, they get Raise Dead, they get all sorts of cool potions that you can use to heal and give restorative abilities, as well as some really interesting possibilities that you can huck at people. You want to give your friend a flying speed of 10 feet for 10 minutes? Or give somebody gills? Or just make somebody a little bit quicker? You can do all of that.
And I'll say this for the Alchemist. The fun thing about Alchemist is that in D&D, right, we have a tendency to look at things like potions as like medicine, unless you're a cleric and you use, strictly speaking, like magic based medicines, right? And if you're just an adventuring party that tends to purchase your potions, we really kind of tend to forget sometimes about where those potions come from, who makes them, the fact that they're actually an incredible feat of magical engineering, whether it's arcane or science based. So if you wanted to play an alchemist that is a kaboom alchemist, you can. But if you want to really lean into that, I don't have magical powers, I don't have magical abilities, but I'm smart enough to learn how to make someone swift, how to make someone fast. To me, any of these subclasses, that is the key to an artificer. You're really focusing on the fact that you don't do magic the way other casters do, the way this world tends to expect it, this arcane sorcery based world. You use the power of your mind to do things that other people have to be born with the ability to do, like do magic, cast healing spells. If you can, you're so smart that you've learned how to do that with your hands. So while you can do the same thing that a cleric can do, you do it purely with the power of your brain. And if you use that angle, you can really lean into a lot of characters and a lot of archetypes.
All right. After that, we have the armorer.
Pay no attention to the evil grin and hours of DM trauma I've caused.
What do you think about art? What do you think about armorers, Cam?
Oh, I just kind of love them to death, you know. Getting to build a giant magic suit that protects me from the outside world and all the harm that the DM tries to cause. There's nothing more gratifying than having full plate magically enhanced armor and the DM saying, "Hey, does a 21 hit?" Nope. No, it doesn't.
There's nothing
Try
wrong.
again.
There's nothing better than being what is effectively a shitty wizard and saying, "Nope, the 20 does not hit me."
Truer words. Now, the thing about the armor is it's built around building armor, light or heavy armor. The Infiltrator, the Guardian. And it also gives you things like extra attack. It gives you access to spells like Magic Missile, Hypnotic Pattern, Greater Invisibility, and Wall of Force. If you don't know why those spells specifically are amazingly potent, good. Your DM loves you and hasn't abused you yet. But if you want to be somebody who works on and tools up your own armor, making your character tanky, stealthy, powerful in combat, and maybe even just a little in copyright infringy, this is the guy you want.
Minor copyright
After that,
infringement
we
never
have...
hurt any DMs.
Never.
No, this is the awe-inspiring fiction line. The man of ferrous material. Next up, you have the artillerist. Now, the artillerist, not gonna lie, the artillerist is if you want to be an artificer and a bully. You get shield, the best defensive spell in the game. You get shatter, very useful utility damage spell. Fireball. Just fireball. Always fireball.
I didn't
yes,
ask
fireball.
how big the room was. I said cast fireball.
Now, I will say,
Ice Storm and...
Fireball is pretty cool, but Fireball launching out of an Eldritch shotgun, that's even cooler.
And much like the Armorsmith, you also get Wall of Force, which, again, if you don't know why that's cool, you will. You also get to make your Eldritch Cannon. It's a gun that can be a flamethrower, or a ballista, or a healing gun turret. No big deal. It's just whatever.
I am biased. I am very biased, but I will say that the other version of Artificer is still available online, and it was the Unearthed Arcana version where you have the gunsmith, and they, for their gun feature, get the thunder cannon. So just as an alternative to this, if this artillerist isn't quite striking your fancy, if your DM's open to it, again, communication is key, Feel free to look up Unearthed Arcana, Original Artificer. There are alternate gun options if this one isn't quite striking your fancy, or if it doesn't fit the setting, or if you need something a little bit blah, blah, blah. There are other options if your DM is open to them, and I'm sure we'll get more into that later.
Right. Lastly, you have the Battlesmith. Now, the Battlesmith is interesting because it plays like a pet class, but it reads like a paladin. You get Heroism and Shield, Branding Smite, Warding Bond, Aura of Purity, Banishing Smite and Mask Your Wounds. Those are amazing spells, amazing utility, and amazing battlefield control. You also gain proficiency in martial weapons, and when you attack with a magic weapon, you can use your intelligence mod instead of strength or dex for the attack and damage rolls. Do you want to use a great sword because you're so smart and you know how to use it, despite the fact that you've got weak little noodly arms? Then boy, do I have a subclass for you. You also get what's called a Steel Defender. You want that little robe? You want that little Tamagotchi made manifest rolling around in its little robot feet, like lashing out and attacking your enemies? Well, give it a few more levels, but you do get to start off with a Steel Defender at level 3. It's a cute little pet, usually a robot. Make it a cute little robot pet. I don't know, a dog, a cat, maybe a stoat. You want a little robot stoat? Stoats are cool, right? Stoats? Stoats been canceled? No? Cool. Be a stoat. You also get extra attack. And then, and this is really fun, really interesting, you get your Arcane Jolt feature. I'm only pointing this out because when you hit a target with a magic weapon attack or your Steel Defender hits a target, you can do an extra 2d6 force damage, or choose one creature or object you can see within 30 feet of that target and restore 2d6 hit points to it. So yes, you can kick the door in, stab the bad guy, and heal the victim all on the same turn. Gesundheit. But those are your subclasses. Your rough breakdown, and maybe just a little bit of inspiration for you to go, do I want the bang stick? Do I want the breastplate? Or do I want Bow Wow the robot dog chasing people down and stealing their shoes? Or, better potions, because if you've never been in that position, I'll refer to my previous statements. So we've covered the class, we've covered the subclass. Next on the docket, what are we talking about?
Well, with all of this, the question is, how do you translate all of these wonderful things that we've just learned into characters that you've seen on television, that you've seen in movies? Because we've kind of explained a little bit. We've gone into details of how the class works, but some of this may sound like jargon too. But if I tell you an armor artificer is literally just Iron Man with the right infusions picked, now you understand. If someone tells you that what was the character's name, Joe? Honeydew from
Honey Lemon.
Honey Lemon. Thank you. That you want to play Honey Lemon from Big Hero 6. That's just an alchemist. That is just someone that is gonna throw potions together that have some interesting effects. Artillerist. I can't tell you how many characters are out there with big guns that go boom.
My two favorite, I think the most exemplary, are going to be Jinx from Arcane and Dean Winchester from Supernatural.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of Batman, or technically, if you really want to get into some weeds about it, Ash from Pokemon.
See, now I'm intrigued.
That's next episode.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole we need to explore later.
That's a future. That's the AP course.
Right.
Next up.
But a lot of characters, like the likes of Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty, Iron Man, arguably with a couple of multi-classings here and there, you could do Batman, Spider-Man. Characters of that nature fit the Artificer just so perfectly. And we explained it a little bit earlier. There is just an entire list of infusions where you can plug and play and build your character damn near perfect to what you've seen on TV in movies, and you know what I would love to translate into D&D. And speaking of translating, we talked about a little bit earlier. How would you, Olive or Joe, in these situations, how would you translate some of these abilities into the game, into the RP? How would you specifically use Flash of Genius to help out your party? How have you bullied your DM with a set of magical armor? Not speaking from experience, I promise. But how would you translate some of these abilities?
I think that the core of and this is with any class, so I'm not going to pretend like this is exclusive to Artificer, but I think Artificer is one of the classes where it is only as good as your imagination. And the thing about that is that while some classes are just a little bit more hold your hand than others, in the sense of the abilities are exactly what they say on the tin, and you can think or already know how you would adapt those. As someone who played Artificer almost the year it dropped, right, practically when it dropped, I can say that it took a little bit of work to really translate the mechanics into RP. And so to your question, how would I, use Flash of Genius RP wise? Well, as someone who embarrassingly waited to use Flash of Genius for a really long time because I forgot that I could, I can say as soon as I started using it, it was a game changer. And you can really do it in a lot of ways. If you're going more the Rick Sanchez route, you are cutting and a bit of an a-hole about it, and you know that you are smarter than everyone in the room, and you want to make it their problem. But you can also know that you're smarter than everyone in the room and not want to make it their problem. In fact, if you're trying to have conducive RP and conducive, play with the rest of your party, I would argue you don't do it the Rick way. You could do it more the Tony way, where you're still kind of a tool about it, but in a sweet way, right? In the MCU sort of Tony Stark quippy kind of way. Me personally, I tend to use my Flash of Genius in the sense of me and my party have been playing for a long time, and we kind of have that gel where you've learned what each other's strengths are. So my character isn't super nurturing about it, but they're very much like, I know my party's strengths, and I can use my strengths to bring out the best in them. I have a character in my party who is a super high level sorcerer, and their arcana is almost as high as mine as the Artificer. However, we have very different interpretations of arcana. They're very magic-y in the most traditional sense, and I learned how to do magic through blunt force trauma. I learned how to do magic by hacking the weave that is magic and doing it with absolutely no innate magical ability whatsoever, because that was how I chose to interpret my Artificer. I was not born with magic. I learned how to magic basically manually. I can magic physically, manually. I found magic in its form in the weave, and I learned how to hack into it and do stuff. So because of that, I play my Artificer like she is incredibly in tune to the mechanics of magic. And when I see my fellow party members getting ready to do something, I can point out, channels, weak points, things they should be focusing on. And I treat it as if she's sort of like chiming in to make a suggestion. Sometimes she's like, oh no, you're not, you don't have it. She butts in, but it really depends on the situation and which character I'm dealing with. She likes to give the blood hunter who plays like a barbarian some hell, so she'll tap in there and say, oh gosh, let me just look there, and the lid, and you can do it that way. There's other times where me and the wild magic sorcerer, I sort of channel his chaos and channel what he knows and point it in the right direction. Even our cleric, who's a wisdom-based character, my character will be rolling really high on intel based checks and running down a rabbit hole, and then they'll pick up on something that I thought or said out loud and go, wait a minute, and they'll do insight, or they'll play off of my intelligence roll, and if they springboarded off of something I said, I'll flash of genius them, because that shows mechanically and then RP wise it shows a lot of cooperation. You are springboarding off of something I said in one of my intellectual rants where I'm just spouting calculations and thoughts. They picked up on it, and then I gave them flash of genius to imply that they got the idea from me, and then they got to make their own role.
Nice. I myself, when I played my Artificer, I played the Armorsmith. I had a much different interpretation. It was less that he forced magic or forced himself to learn magic, but it's the fact that he would use like little bits of magic to science his way through things. Everything that my Artificer did, because I played a gnome, so he heavily relied on his armor. Like, that was his safety blanket. He didn't hardly come out of it. I didn't even tell the party I was a gnome for the first like 4 or 5 sessions. They just thought I was 6'5" and yoked, because that's what my armor was built like. Only to open it up and have the little Men in Black moment going, he's a what? But he very much used magic as a science. He channeled magic through his armor, and it was, look what my armor can do, not look what I can do. So any spell that I cast was in my RP was an attachment from my armor. You know, if I casted Firebolt, it came from like a gemstone in the arm, and it was like Tony Stark's missile launcher. If I casted, you know, little bit of copyright infringement, if I casted Lightning Bolt, it came from his center chest plate. I didn't RP as heavy with my Flash of Genius. I just kind of used it like spur of the moment as a reaction to help the party. What I did do is I used a lot of my higher intelligence rolls, as my character is easily the smart. Because what's funny about Quincy, my Artificer, is he started off as he was supposed to be the nerd who was there to help, and after one session of playing with my group, he turned into, I'm surrounded by idiots.
I think that you shouldn't be afraid to embrace that, as long as you're respecting all of your group, right? Because again, you want to play an asshole, you don't want to be an asshole.
Of course. No, absolutely.
And I think that right there is one of the most important tenets of an Artificer, because we all know that wizards can get a little bit that way, right? And Artificer is even worse, because they're a wizard with a chip on their shoulder. I think that's kind of universal for Artificers. You are a wizard, because, you know, like I mentioned before, right? My sorcerer in my party has more innate, they have magic in their blood. And my character, which I can describe in a minute, my character doesn't have that. However, my arcana is just as high as theirs. So how do you justify that, right? Well, they hit the books and they learned everything they could, and they weren't as good as wizards. They didn't have the innate ability. So they found a way. Find a way through the technology is probably the best adaptation I can say, nutshell, of Artificers.
And with that, I use that a lot to translate into my dice rolls. So knowing that my character at the table was smarter than everyone else's, for better or for worse, because it did get him in trouble. It did get him in trouble a couple times, going, I'm smarter than this, I know better, and then that backfiring. What I would do is everyone would go, hey, I am the most adept, I am the most intelligent, let me try to, you know, channel the history roll or the magic roll, because I'm gonna understand it more, and then I can translate that to the party. Specifically with the item infusion that we talked about, we had a sorcerer who was constantly, not for, you know, his own fault, but he was not the beefy boy of the party. He was the sorcerer. So what I did is, when I got item infusion, or not item infusion, but the store spelling, I bought a cheap necklace from one of the shops, gave it to him, and I stored cure wounds into it. So if the cleric couldn't get to him and I couldn't get to him, he could just tap on it and it would and automatically heal him for the same amount of points. And that came
You
in
never
handy.
know.
Oh, that saved
Yeah.
his life more than
You
once.
never know how much one stored spell is going to change the tides. And when you're the artificer and you can do that, I think for me, infusion is one of the most versatile things an artificer can have. I think for me, it's one of the most core elements of creatively fueling an artificer, because you can flavor it. This is a conversation we can have, and Joe could definitely pitch in on this as a DM. You can flavor your inventions as mundane items that you've either cobbled together, built, created, and then infused with it. You can flavor that as you invented something, and then the actual kaboom part or the major component is the fact that you infused a spell into it. You can come up with all kinds of crazy inventions, and if your DM is okay with working with you on that kind of flavoring and you can get creative, your DM might even be okay with homebrewing extra effects that can happen with the machine. If you have a spell infused in it and you've been clever enough at how that machine works, then now it's an invention that you have, and your DM, if they're comfortable, can add to it, expand on it, let you build onto it as your own invention machine. And as you get higher level, it can do cooler and cooler things.
And that specifically, because you brought it up, reminded me of an infusion that artificers get and can improve / change at higher levels, and that is the oh my goodness, I lost it. The magical copy ability, I think is what it's called.
Yes.
Replicate magic item. So I heavily use that. I created a pair of glasses that could cast detect magic. And I think I gave them to one of the party members, or I had it myself. I don't remember which. I specifically remember inventing a bag of holding. So I very much treated every replicant item as, look what I invented.
Yes. And it's another thing, and just to tack on to that really quick, like I was saying earlier with the alchemist, right? In this world of D&D, we tend to view potions as just something that's available at the 7-Eleven. They might be expensive, but we don't really think about the people making them. Same thing with magical items. Some of them are god tier, some of them are lost in ruins and caves, but at the same time, there's somebody crafting these magical items. And so when you, as the player, can be the one that crafts these magical items at higher levels, you can do something fun and cool with it and then tack your name onto it. Your DM can yeet that into a future campaign. This is so-and-so's blank of such and such, because you made it at high enough level, and there's nothing cooler than having a spell named after you, than having an item named after you. That is the magic of Artificer. When you look at a wizard and what they can do, but then you look at what you did with your cold, bare hands, and when I learned how to do this with nothing but motor oil, wrenches, sweat, and can-do attitude, there's some real, blue-collarness about Artificer. Like, you can be in a mage's tower if you want to be, but there's also this element of Bear Grylls, nitty gritty. I did this, and there's honestly, I think it's impossible to make an artificer without some ego, without some pretension, because you're looking at a wizard or a bard who went to school with these innate abilities that they have, and you're sitting there like, I learned how to do this with my cold, bare hands. I'm better than you because I worked harder. I don't have a problem. You have a problem.
The Artificer is probably the embodiment of something that you're going to hear a lot if you haven't already, which is flavor is free. Okay? Your fighter has a longsword. Does it have a winged hilt? What's the pommel look like? What's it wrapped in? Is anything written on the blade? All of that's free. Artificer is a case study in what happens when you have a class who interacts with mechanics, specifically attunement, item creation, and mechanical rolls for ability checks and saving throws. But the flavor is free. So let's use both of your examples. We're going to use the item creation ability to make a magical item, and we're going to use the blood, sweat, and tears. Okay? So let's say we have our battlesmith, and he has made a robot ferret, because it's a long cat snake, and he likes ferrets. Well, he needs to have a replicated item. So what he wants is a quiver of Alona. That's an item that has 3 compartments that link to an extra dimensional space and hold items. And the object itself never weighs more than 2 pounds. So the shortest compartment can hold up to 60 arrows or bolts or similar objects like darts. The mid-sized compartment holds up to 18 javelins or similar objects. And the longest compartment holds up to 6 long objects such as bows, quarterstaffs, or spears. So if we have our artificer and his robot ferret that he can reach in and pull a spear out of, all it takes is a little bit of spray paint and paper mache, and we've got a very close representation of a character like Toji Fushiguro from Jujutsu Kaisen. He's got a little dude on his shoulder that he can pull weapons out of all day long. Mm-hmm. He's somebody that doesn't have magic like everybody else does and has to rely on his physical ability and his intelligence and his cleverness and his experience to accomplish his goals. Does it always pan out for him? Maybe, maybe not. Can he take a hit? Maybe, maybe not. But what's important is to know that by reskinning your armor to be a t-shirt and comfy pants, by reskinning your quiver to be a little robot worm dude with a weird face, and by reskinning the weapons that you make to be something that is more akin to this character, you can, for no cost or with no issue or impact, take a core item, an official item, and reflavor it to suit your character's aesthetic. Flavor is free. And artificers are all about leveraging that flavor in a specific way.
Especially when you start out. Because the trick here is that there can be, you never want to get to the point where, because that was I will admit this openly, my core issue with Artificer from the beginning was the fact that it takes a while to get good at what you want to get good at. And that's true of almost any class. However, with the Artificer, it is one that you really have to work at. On paper, Artificer can be a little underpowered because I used to think Artificer was underpowered. I used to think Artificer wasn't a great class. I still think that it has flaws. However, I think the core issue with Artificer is that you have to want it. You have to want to flavor it until you get to such a point that you can actually make things happen. Because we all know that, or if you don't already know, in a lot of D&D campaigns, it takes a while until your party starts getting resources. You have money, you have income, you have a bar, you have a ship, you have something that nets you income or gives you a stable place to be. My Artificer didn't get a lab until level 8. And once she got a lab, oh, the world was her freaking oyster at that point, because you have the resources, the time, the facilities to actually work on stuff. Until then, you're sort of that one in the corner tinkering with your little things. And at one moment, you make a thing, and then 5-10 levels later, it is something crazy. And that really ties into whether or not your DM is great with on the fly, great with a homebrew. You can do this rules as written Artificer, right? Eventually you get to infuse items, you get to replicate items, and that's magic in and of itself. And when you point out, I'm doing this with nothing but mechanical knowledge, engineering knowledge, and knowledge of the arcane that I'm not attuned to, like I don't have those innate abilities, you still come off like a wizard. It's up to you to really focus on where the differences are between the wizard class and your class. Artificer takes a lot of elbow grease, and it takes a lot of wanting to be an artificer. Having the wherewithal to really point out the fact that for now this is flavor, and eventually it'll be something else. It'll be something more. Once I get the abilities to actually create things, once I get the abilities to infuse and change and alter things. And this is where I would say having a DM that's comfortable with homebrew is a real gift for an artificer. If you know that your DM is experienced, if you know your DM is great with homebrew and they're willing to work with you, capitalize on that, because you can make some awesome things. One of my favorite instances of something that started small and then eventually got big is we had an NPC in my lovely husband Joe's game who had basically created a magnetic based elevator system. There was an artificer in our town who created a magnet based system to create an elevator. And I thought, well, what if I did something cool with that? If I work on that and I commit resources to it for however many levels it takes, can I do something like X, Y, or Z? Eventually, I started off and I showed my party, guys, look. And it was the Avatar marbles spinning around each other because they were magnets. And I go, look at what I made. And everybody's like, cool. And then the day finally came where at level 11, I used that to get me and my friend the sorcerer out of a death match with several demons monsters that came to attack us because I had converted the magnetic weave magnets into a skyhook system that could zip me around the battlefield like the skyhook system in BioShock Infinite. And that was so gratifying. It took a lot of levels, it took a lot of resources, but starting from something tiny and playing the long con to know that I want to be underpowered. I want to put my blood, sweat, and tears into this so that I can show the party that I created something and I will be a badass in 5 levels.
I have a very much similar story. Little bit of homebrew in this, but my DM played a lot of the Artificer abilities, rules as written. This is particular flavor mixed with history of the character, which turned into like this beautiful moment that we had. So my one of the infusions that you get, I think, at 5th level is Homunculus Servant. You can make a little robot pet. They're not as powerful as the Iron Defender, but they are useful.
No.
And I made a little robot hedgehog named Dumas. And the whole party loved him, and I was like, my greatest invention! And everyone loved it, and I used it here and there. I used it for certain checks and whatnot. But later, having built Dumas and having built his armor so effectively, one of our player characters died. We were playing Curse of Strahd, and he got written off by the producers. But no, he was killed by Strahd, and we couldn't recover his body because it was literally killed in the castle, and we couldn't get it. So, using the history of Dumas and using the history of building the armor, what I did with the player and the DM's permission, we went on a little bit of a side quest, did a little bit of magic work, and what I did is I built a Warforged that looked like the player's original character. And when I completed the quest and we activated it, that was his new character. That's awesome. I went from this little tiny hedgehog to literally a tiefling inspired Warforged.
And that's so awesome because you look at that and that's such an example of the fact that I think the main appeal of an artificer is that you're deliberately kind of hobbling yourself in a way. You're going to be in a party with people that can do amazing things. You have clerics that can bring back the dead. Well, you don't have that ability. But with nothing but your wit, your brains, your engineering skills, some sheet metal, and a wrench, I created a vessel for my friend that died. You effectively resurrected someone.
With nothing but a couple tinkering tools and a maniacal laugh.
Couple tinkering tools, yeah. Nothing but a can-do attitude. Freaking some, you know what I mean? And there's so much you can build for the natural order.
Yeah, some welding goggles and a new character.
Yep.
So,
and that's honestly, I think, always going to end up being the core trait for an artificer. I laugh in the face of gods and men alike. Because I have a wrench, some elbow grease, some oil, and coffee. And I don't need to sleep. I do, but I'm not going to.
So with that, we'll start winding down here. Do each of you have any final thoughts about the Artificer, the Artificing class, Favorite infusions, favorite subclasses that you like to use before we sign off for this episode.
To be brief, I'll put it like this. The Artificer class is a master class in, hey DM, there's a thing I want to do. If your DM is not comfortable homebrewing, if they're not comfortable inventing usable crafting rules, if they're not comfortable doing all that from scratch, stay tuned. There will be resources to help. But if they're not comfortable going off book, off script, and leaving rules as written behind in order to live in the spirit of a class, Artificer is starkly underwhelming and is, at best, an incredibly clever, mediocre, and ultimately relatively weak class. But between a really good Eldritch Cannon or a really good suit of armor, a couple of key infusions, and a DM that says, you know what, roll for it, we'll see what happens, you too could take Orcus's shoes.
That was me. I did that.
And that's what it comes down to. If you're comfortable, if you are an experienced player or a player who is very creative and has a lot of these, well, what if I took this and smashed them together and then made it do this? If that's how you think and that's what brings you joy, sit down with the DM, work this out, because this might be the class for you. But if you want to be spamming high-level spells or dual-wielding battle axes,
Doing the big numbies.
yeah, if you want to do the big numbies in combat, maybe not Artificer. If you want to do some really weird stuff on the back end, boy, do I have a class for you.
Olive, any final words for the Artificing class?
Yes, I think if I'm being 1,000,000% honest, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Artificer can be a little underwhelming. It rules is written. If you have a DM who's very rules is written, not comfortable with homebrew, it's sort of like running it for the first time, or just a DM that really needs there to be precedent for something, it might not be the best class for you, because at its core, Artificer is a class that flourishes with creativity. I stumbled into Artificer because I wanted to play a very particular character, which we'll get into on the AP course for Artificer, because at its core, Artificer is your Iron Mans, they're your Rick Sanchez's, they're your Jinxes. Those are your Artificers, and they're very textbook with what they are. So if you are ride or die for Artificer, you're going to have a great time, because if you have that ingenuity, if you have that creativity, if you have that knowledge of what can and can't happen in your world, and you can get creative and convince your DM of it, then Artificer is the class for you. If you have a DM that is open to interpretation, open to creating really good, well-balanced additions to rules as written, really go for Artificer, I would suggest it. If you know your DM, you know you, and you know your creativity, the sky's the limit for Artificer, because it really is a class where when you make something happen, it feels earned. When you've spent levels working on a project, when you're that weird tinkerer in the corner who everybody writes off because you have no magical ability, you were not born with magic, you don't have magic in your blood, you don't have a god that gives you magic, you don't have a voice that gives you magic, but you can match their energy and do the same thing they can do with nothing but your wits, your smarts, and your hands. There is something so accomplishing about playing an Artificer. And when you translate those mechanics into RP moments, I could sit here and talk about heartfelt moments I've had as an Artificer that have made me as a player feel like I accomplished something. Because not only did my character make a huge accomplishment and stand out in this menagerie of players and people who have all these magical, insane abilities, when I did that with nothing but my smarts and my will and a couple tools, it feels earned, and nothing really feels more fun in D&D than having an experience you've never had before because you wanted it enough and you put effort into it. And I could talk about so many achievements that my Artificer has done, a lot of it due to homebrew, a lot of it thanks to homebrew, but just in general, the concept of I scraped this out of nothing because I'm that smart. When you feel like a badass, amongst the wizards that can wield the Artifice Arcane, when you feel like a badass up against fighters who could tear a man in half with their bare hands, it really is an accomplishment. And it makes you feel good as both a player and as that character. And I don't think any other class really has that bleed over like Artificer does. It doesn't have that conjoining of your accomplishments and your players' accomplishments.
Very nice. I 100% agree. My final thoughts for Artificer is yes, a lot of it there is room for, maybe a little bit of homebrew, a lot of creativity. There's so much creativity to Artificer, and it can really turn into a character that starts one way, that starts off small and builds so much bigger and just advances so much, so far. Because, when it comes to, like Olive said, you almost feel accomplished. You feel like, your Artificer has created something. To see, example, like a fighter go from able to hit something hard to being able to hit something really, really hard. That, it feels a certain way that, okay, I can beat up a goblin, now I can beat up a dragon. Whereas with Artificers, it goes, okay, I can build look at this tiny little box that cost me, my first level spell slot that can, repeat a 6-second phrase to look at this, this literal Gundam that I built out of my armor. It is
my gun go pew pew,
yeah.
and now my gun go boom, bitch.
Yeah, there's so much room for growth, so much room for potential, and so much creativity that goes behind this class. It is a lot of fun. For those of you that it's like your first time either DMing it or playing as it, I highly suggest get in the book. Make sure you understand how the infusions work. Make sure you understand how the slots for each of them work. Because there was some confusion with mine, and we had a little RP moment about that. But it's really important to communicate with your DM. It's really important to communicate with your other players and try to, really build what you have in mind for your character into what you can accomplish in the game. But with that, this has been an absolute wonderful first episode for Creatures and Conjurations. Our next,
so on track,
right? Our next episode is going to be more of less of a how-to and more of an advanced course.
Let's have fun.
Artificers. Let's have fun. Let's show you which infusions are going to make your Iron Man suit, which infusions are going to be your Jinxes or your Technomancers from Borderlands, which is another example I came up with.
Yep.
Because if that's not a Battlesmith Artificer, I don't know what is.
I don't know what is. Also, what are some weird characters that you would never think could Artificer and actually do?
Are, right? So that
or you could make into one.
That'll be the next episode when we really dive deep into the characters. But thank you all for joining us. As always, like us on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the Spotify, where you're going to be able to see more of these episodes coming up. And we appreciate you all. Thank you for joining us.